If you knew how truly powerful your mind was, you wouldn't say or think something you didn't want to be true. My session here today, because we have so many Superbrain graduates here and people have gone through the quest or considering going through the quest, is really to personalize something special for you today. As Mia mentioned, my book comes out 2 months from now, and I'm really excited about it because it's something I didn't want to put out there. It's been 28 years of me teaching this, and the question I always got was about the book. And honestly, I haven't talked about this publicly. The reason why is I just didn't have I want to help people, but I've always had this kind of push and pull in my life. I'm going to speak to you as if we're family, okay? Because I feel like this is our reunion here. When I do what I do, and these videos and the podcasts, it's all along the years of doing this, there was always opportunities to be able to do it in a bigger way. Over the decades ago, infomercials and PBS specials and Kwik Brain franchise schools everywhere, and media and book. And honestly, I don't know if you can relate to this, but the reason I said no is just I just didn't want the attention. My story. Growing up with my brain injury and having my learning difficulties, it was every day in class, my superpower was the ability to shrink down. You know what I mean? To grow really, really small. And I would condition that every day because I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't want to be called on in class. I was scared to death to be called on in class, actually. So my superpower was not to be seen. It was to be invisible and be really tiny. And I think we all have areas of development and such. And so I really didn't feel comfortable doing something on a kind of a bigger scale. And then a few years ago, I was in an accident where I almost died. And how many people have had a near-death experience? Raise your hand. Look around. It puts things into perspective, doesn't it, in terms of what's most important, and made me think about what I would leave behind in that case. And the next day, I signed the book deal and did that because I felt like, at heart, I'm a reading teacher. My teachers back then they wouldn't have thought I would read a book, much less wrote a book. And so if anybody could identify with that, people asked me last night, why did it take so long to write a book? It was just because I just didn't feel comfortable, having, again, these spotlights, even now, is still a little bit jarring for me. But I feel like shame on me if I could help somebody who's struggling and suffering the way that I did, and I didn't do something all I could to be able to help that one person. Do you know what I mean? So what I wanted to have a conversation here about that I feel like could serve you the most, the methodologies are very clear, right? I teach that in Superbrain. I mean, it's just, hey, 10 minutes a day, let's just learn one thing, let's practice one thing. I believe what this industry really needs is integration, meaning that you don't need any more knowledge. If you're here, my assumption and my hallucination is this is not the first event you've ever attended. Is that fair? And a lot of, my podcast is not the first podcast you've listened to or online training that you've gone through. And I feel like sometimes there's too much information. And I think all knowledge really is self-knowledge and making it your own. And I feel like a lot of the questions I got last night, which I talked to many of you last night, a lot of the questions is just, you have to trust yourself. Like the questions I'm getting, I hear what's behind it, and it's just having trust in yourself. I really think the journey that we're on here, and I don't have slides, so I thought we'd make this kind of conversational, and I feel like that would be more valuable because we have 300 million video views online on my morning routine and using a visual pacer and be suave and all that. But if you're not doing it on a regular basis, what's holding you back? The reason I wrote this book, Limitless, is not about being perfect. It's about progressing and advancing beyond what you believe is possible. I'm careful using these words because the subtitle of my book is Limitless, Upgrade Your Brain, Learn Anything Faster, and then Unlock Your Exceptional Life. And the reason why I use the word this exceptional life is because back in school, in grade school, I used to spend time with all the nerds and the geeks. Because we had some, not because I had the same grades as they did at all. It's because I was interested in comic books, and I was interested in video games, right? And I remember one morning, the teacher came into the class and said, they made an announcement saying that we're creating a brand new group, and we're gonna of students, and these are the exceptional students, and they called it MASP, M-A-S-P. And that stands for More Able Student Program. They're more able than everybody else, right? And I was like the only one in that group that wasn't asked to be in that group, right? So as a kid, I created my own group called LASP, Less Able Student Program, right? But I always thought in my mind, like, how come those kids are the exceptional ones? How come they could have an exceptional life? And and this is not a slight against teachers it's just my mother became a special education teacher because she focused and really her focus was to help me, because she didn't want to see me suffer. I think that teachers are the modern day superheroes, in terms of their compassion, their caring, their level of commitment. They're not always compensated, like they need to be and should be, but I wanted to be one of those exceptional kids and prove that this is possible for everybody else. And so I want you to think about, as I share this model for you, it's really simple. It's just 3 circles I'm going to draw. I want you to think about an area of your life where you feel stuck. Like, let's turn this as something like let's turn this into a workshop, and not like a keynote, right? So is there an area of your life, your health, your wellness, just kind of close your eyes and take a breath. And just in your mind, what area do you know has more potential? And maybe you're working really, really hard. It could be your physical health, your mental. It could be your financial. It could be your career, your business, your relationships. Where do you feel like you can make gains? And where do you feel like you're being held back, but you're not sure why? Because that was the theme with every single conversation I had last night, is they feel like there's more. And they go to these events, and they learn a lot of things, and they went through a quest. Or they can't get themselves to finish. Raise your hand if you signed up for a quest and put it off and procrastinate going through it. And so what are the forces that are keeping you from making progress, doing the things you should do? Because I don't know how many speakers need to say, to meditate or eat good foods, good whole foods, or to be able to move and exercise. But common sense is not common practice. So I want to give you the code that I believe really unlocks those things. Actually, do we have mic runners back there? I'd love for a couple of, how many of you have gone through Superbrain again? Is someone willing to share their story of like kind of before and after and just wave your hand, please. You can introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hello, Louis Adio from San Diego. And
let's give him a hand. Louis.
I got the Superbrain from Mindvalley for myself, but also for my daughter. My daughter was misdiagnosed actually as being dyslexic or not being, having issues and problems. And I saw where you described what it was like for you as a child. And so I did it with her and my son. And we would sit together every night and work through it. And magic started happening, where she would do these vocabulary type tests and maybe get 2, 3 wrong and she was really kind of put in a box, talk about putting a box by her teachers and one of the parents. I think she started acting out during a time, and after going through, I'd go through slowly, and we'd sit through it, and then we'd talk about it, and then we'd do the exercise where you hold the word up to your left, and
Yeah.
it was phenomenal. And then all of a sudden, she started getting 9s and 10s on her, out of 10. So it was really amazing. And then for myself, I would always have issues with remembering people's names and, with the imagery and making things fun. It was a phenomenal experience.
Amazing.
And for it to touch myself, but also to touch my daughter, and she's now thriving, and I understand where those issues came from. But as a parent, as an adult, how many children get put in these, like you said, more able, get these classes, and it just really reframed everything for me. So it was amazing.
Thank you very
experience.
much. Let's give him a hand. How many of you, raise your hand if you have kids, children. Raise your hand if you once were a child. Raise your hand, make sure we're on. How many of you done one of these programs, mine or somebody else's, with your children? Raise your hand. Phenomenal. Anybody else want to share their kind of joy story of going through the program? Just kind of raise your hand like this, because I heard a lot of them last night. And I'll show you the reason why I'm doing this. If you could pass down the mic.
Hello, my name is Teuta Towler. I'm from North Carolina. I took your course last year, and it has helped me tremendously with remembering people's names specifically, because I go to a lot of networking events and I couldn't remember people's names. But what I've seen the most impact was also for my children. I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. I think I shared some of that story with you last night. My 9-year-old had to memorize a speech that was about 200 or 300 words. And typically, when my daughter did that when she was in 4th grade, it took her almost a month. My son's classmate, and she didn't have these resources when she was in 4th grade. And my son, when he's 4th grade this year, we did together your program, and he memorized the 300-word script in 30 minutes.
Amazing.
So one other thing that I've learned from your program is also the nutrition for Superbrain and things that help memorize and kind of give your brain a little boost. And that also has helped my kids when they have tests in the school, because it's very stressful. So the week or 2 weeks before, because it doesn't always happen to follow the nutritionist program when we're in a rush in the morning. But the week or two leading to their school test, especially these crazy, super anxiety, high expectation tests, that really has helped. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Give her a hand. And just one more, if somebody's close to a mic.
Hi, I'm Michael from France, but I'm French-German. I took your class last year while I was waiting for my visa to come to the US. So I studied chemistry, and I was, upset that I learned so late all these tools. But I came to San Francisco and for an internship, and I really, really wanted to be the best version of myself, and I wanted to be ready. So what happened, I took your class February while I was waiting my visa, and I started in May, and I really wanted to be on the top. So I took 2 hours to 3 hours every day for your class. I really did it like 100%. I teach it to somebody every day, and I learned so much. But now I have a problem, that's why I'm sharing it, is when I was doing your class, I was applying everything you were saying, and in every lesson, I really remembered everything. But I really struggle to implement that now after the class and to use all the methods and the list methods, and I just don't really do it. And do you have any like similar, or I feel it's a bit frustrating, and that's why I'm sharing it right now.
Amazing. Let's give him a hand. So that's the perfect segue, whether it's this program, this specific quest, or anything in your life, fill it in the blank of an area of your life where you're just stalled, where you feel like that there's a limit on you. When I was going through my challenges, and I believe that our struggles can become strengths, that difficult times, how many of you are facing some adversity right now? Raise your hand, which is commendable that you're here. I mean, that's why I feel like it's so important, this community. I'm always going to come back to community, because that's one of the initiatives of Mindvalley, is not only this radical evolution, but it's radical inclusion, right? That you're not here alone. And so part of this is getting inspiration, instruction from each other, because I find that for me, people come to these events not only for the content, but the incredible connections. And a shift in belief that somebody else in the room who's like them is making progress is sometimes more important than something a speaker could say on stage. Is that fair? Now, here, as you're thinking about the area that you feel like stuck, for me, it was this label. When I was 9 years old, a teacher, I was slowing down the class, right? Because I wasn't getting the lesson. And, you know, I could say, what ended up happening, you know that one of my teachers said, you know, that's the boy with the broken brain. But I really feel like it wasn't coming from a bad place. I think it actually was really good intention. It's because I started getting like a lot of, there's a lot of negativity from my classmates towards me that I was holding back the class and being made fun of. So I think the teacher was more coming to my defense. Maybe it came out the wrong way, but coming out saying that, you know, let's relax, stop it. You know, this boy has some challenges, right? But what I took out of it was completely different, was that label that I was broken. And so it's really hard to go out there and achieve something, because every single time I didn't do well, I would always go back to that label to explain it, because, oh, I'm the broken one. So that was my thing. So the first area that we need to address, I'm going to draw like 3 circles. The first area that must, for transformation to be take place, is this area of mindset. And mindset I'm defining as what's possible in your life, right? Think about the area that you're not making progress in, and mindset is the set of assumptions and attitudes we have around something, around how the world works, especially what we believe is possible, what we believe we're capable of, what we believe we deserve. Because you've heard me say this, that we're not thermometers, we're thermostats. You know, a thermometer reacts to the environment, a thermostat sets it, but you have an unconscious set of what you believe you deserve in a relationship. Is that fair? And then your behavior will set that, and that intention will create that level, just like a thermostat will, or how much you feel like you're worth in your job or in your business. So for me, it was set at broken, and that became a big challenge. Now, when I went through this, I remember when I finally got into college, and I got into a local university because that's what I could qualify for, and I thought I could make a fresh start because that's what I thought freshman meant, and I took all these classes, and I actually did worse. And at this point, I was like, that's it. I can't do this anymore. It's been a decade and a half. I work harder than everybody around me, and it's just not for me. Because in the school system, the presupposition is 10% people get A's, 10% get B's, and then everybody else, the 80%, you know, they are failing, you know, in school, as opposed to maybe the school failing them. Do you know what I mean? And so it's not about how, I learned later on, it's not how smart you are or how smart your kids are, it's how are you smart. It's not how smart you are, it's how are you smart. And there are multiple forms of genius, right? But at that time, I didn't feel that, I didn't know that. So I wanted to quit school because honestly, I didn't have the money to be there. And so my friend said, I didn't know how to tell my parents, said, hey, why don't you come with me this weekend to visit my family, get some perspective? You know, this is a big decision, right? And how many of you notice that when you get perspective, you change people, you change place, it gives you a new point of view, and you can look at it in a different way. For those of you who've gone through Superbrain and you learn about like 6 thinking hats, and it gives you permission to look at it from a logical standpoint and an emotional standpoint, right? And a critical standpoint. And then at a point at optimistic, what could go right? But it's getting us out of our own like habits of thinking. And so I go there, and the family is very well off, and the father walks me around his property before dinner and asks me a very innocent question, which is the worst question you could ask me. How's school? And I just, because I have all this pent up, emotion, I just start bawling in front of this complete stranger, and I tell him my whole story. And, and all my story is about all the limits I have. And I always tell people, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? If you're always saying, I have a horrible memory, or I'm too old, or I'm not enough, your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk. And again, if you've heard me say this before, because you're one of our students, there's a difference between knowing something and walking it, like in your heart, in your body. And so what keeps us from mastery sometime is this idea that, oh, I know this already. Go get to the other stuff that you're really holding back, right? But it's the fundamentals that the masters get really good at. And so he asked me a new question, and I think questions, besides perspective, are the answer. You learn from Vishen about these dominant questions. I call them dominant questions, these questions we ask all the time that we're always getting answers for. And if you ask yourself, how come I can never do this, or how come I can never be this person, or how come I can't earn this money, your brain's going to find evidence to support that, right? Because your mind, if you knew how truly powerful your mind was, you wouldn't say or think something you didn't want to be true. I'll say that again in a different way. If you knew how truly powerful you are, you wouldn't say, think, or feel something you didn't want to be true. All right? And that's not to say you have one negative feeling or one negative thought and it ruins your life, but going back to consistency. How do you get yourself to consistently take action and listen and apply these techniques? How do you consistently get yourself to show up in a way where there's an ease to it? And so when he asked me that question, how's school? I tell him my whole story, and then he asked me another question, which what leaders and mentors do. They ask really good questions. He said, well, why are you in school? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share? And I'll ask you to just kind of jot these things down, stream of consciousness. What do you want to be? Like for me, I have a to-be list every morning. Everyone has, we all have our to-do list. You have your to-be list, the I am, which is really mindset, right? Mindset is the area of possibility. The mindset really is the what and the who you are. They say the two most powerful words in the English language are the shortest, I am, because whatever you put after that is your life, is your destiny. And he says, why? Why you want these things? And why are you doing this? And I go to answer him, and he says, stop. And he takes out a piece of paper, and he makes me write it down. And we know that writing things down helps you to manifest it better. I mean, it is conclusive. Like some people say upwards of 40% just by writing the things down. Because think about it. You're taking something invisible, and by writing it down, all of a sudden it becomes visible and physical, right? The first stepping point. So all these principles apply. And I start writing like a bucket list, and these are all the things that I envision, that I dream. And when I'm done, I fold up the sheets to put in my pocket, and he reaches out to grab them. And now all of a sudden, he's looking at my intimate desires and dreams. And these are things I've never even shared with people close to me, or even some of them even realize myself. So I'm afraid of being judged. And that's something that keeps us kind of closed, right? This idea that other people's expectations, other people's opinions of them, it makes you mitigate and get smaller. And I say this all the time, but who are the fastest learners? Children, right? And how many times do they fall before they learn how to walk? Hundreds of times. But never after the 200th time do they say, forget this, I'm not walking, right? It wouldn't make a lot of sense, but as adults, a reminder, we do that because we're concerned about how people think about us. And I spent a lot of time in senior centers because, I lost my grandmother, who was my primary giver, my caregiver. My mother and my dad had so many jobs, but I saw her deteriorate, and lose her life to Alzheimer's. So these are the things that shape who you are when you're young. And I'm saying that what forces us in a box, going back to this box, if you feel stuck in a box or a 3D box, like a cube or a cage, there are three forces that keep you in that box. One of them is your mindset. And these are the same forces that will liberate you also as well. So how many of you feel like you were given a label early on? Like you accepted some kind of label and you created a box for yourself. And yet we maintain that box every single day with our thoughts, you know, and because we have 60,000 thoughts a day, the challenge is 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had yesterday and the day before that. And so how do we create a new reality? We could start first with our mindset. But after I made this list, and he took it out of my hand, he's reviewing it, he says, Jim, you are this close to everything on this list. And he spreads his index fingers about a foot apart. And I'm thinking, no way. Give me 10 lifetimes, I'm not going to crack that list. And then he takes his fingers, and what does he do? Show me. He takes them, put them right to the side of my head, meaning in between, my brain was the key to unlock these dreams. And he takes me into a room of his home that I've never seen before. It is wall-to-wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. And keep in mind, I've never read a book cover to cover, and I'm not a great reader, right? And it's like walking into a room full of snakes. But what makes it worse is he starts grabbing snakes off of the shelf and then handing them to me. And I'm looking at these titles of these books, and they're these biographies of incredible men and women in history, and some very early personal growth books. I mean, Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, Dale Carnegie. How many of you know these names? Think and Grow Rich, right? And he says, Jim, I want you to read one of these books a week. And keep in mind, I admire this man. He's obviously very successful and very happy, but I can't do that. I can't promise to read one book a week. And I tell him I have all this schoolwork, and that's why I can't. And he looks right at me and he says, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. And I didn't realize at that time it was a Mark Twain quote, but this was 25 plus years ago. But I was like, that's very inspiring. It's so inspirational, and yet inspiration is not going to change me right now. I can't do this, right? And I'm fighting for to stay in this box. And then he's a very smart man. He reaches into his pocket and he pulls out my bucket list, a list of all my dreams and desires, and he starts to read every single one of them out loud. And imagine you're 18 years old, you don't know who you are, you feel like you're broken, and you're hearing your deepest dreams and desires in another person's voice, like incanted out in the universe. And it messed with my mind and my heart something fierce, my soul. It really shook it up, because a lot of the things on that list were things I wanted to do for my family, things they could never afford. Even if they had the resources, they would never do that for themselves. And the reason I'm bringing this up is the first thing that keeps us from doing something is the mindset we don't deserve it, or it's not possible, right? The second force that keeps us stuck is the second circle, which is your motivation. Your motive for taking action. Because you could believe everything is possible and that you deserve it, but if you don't have drive. Now, when I say motivation, I'm not saying coming to an event like this and being around positive people and getting all excited, because how many of you have ever done that? And then what happens the next day? And you're laughing because that's the laughter of recognition. And listen, your neighbor's laughing because we all experience that. And motivation for me is not something where you get really excited and then it wears off like a warm bath. It's really nice. But then after 10, 15 minutes, it gets cold again, right? So I don't believe you need to psych yourself up every single time. I believe there's a formula for sustainable motivation. And it's these three things. This is the formula to be motivated. It's reasons times energy times small, simple steps. I believe if you give someone an idea, you enrich their life. But if you teach them how to learn, they can enrich their own lives.